Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sarah Waldman. We're going to get started. I just want to thank you for attending this webinar and tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. So I am the Assistive Technology Consultant for Saltillo. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Saltillo, we are a company that makes communication devices. We make, if you're familiar with NovaChat, Chat Fusion, Touch Chat Express, as well as the Touch Chat app. So I am also a speech language pathologist, and prior to working for Saltillo, I worked many years in a pediatric clinical setting as well as in a private practice, and I was always specializing in AAC. So for those of you who aren't as familiar, AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, and that is a modality or a form of communicating that individuals may use if either they are not able to communicate verbally, or maybe they have some sounds and some words and they're just not enough to get their messages across or to express themselves fully, or oftentimes some kids may have some sounds and words that are just not clearly understood by others. And so AAC is a good option to augment the words and communication that they do have. So today we're going to talk a little bit about aided language input, which is a strategy that can be used with any individual who's using any form of AAC. So I may touch on some of the Saltillo devices, but really this is a strategy that can be used with anybody using any form of augmentative communication, even if it's just pictures or other devices as well. So feel free to put some questions in the chat box, and at the end of the presentation I will get to those. Okay. So I know my audience here might be some different people, whether you're a therapist or a teacher or a parent. This presentation should apply to you, and you should be able to gain something from learning about strategies to help your child or your student who may be using an AAC device. So just to briefly highlight, over the next hour, we are going to discuss what aided language input is, the characteristics and roles and responsibilities of you as the communication partner. We are going to discuss how shared reading can be a vehicle for teaching language through this strategy called aided language input. And we're going to identify how to use AAC in the context of that shared reading experience and put it into practice with some strategies and tips as well. So why are we here? Language development is so important for our individuals using AAC. And while there are many AAC strategies available, aided language input is one of the most effective. So I want to talk a little bit today about that strategy and how you can implement it into any environment that you may be in. This is a quote from a parent, and it's just interesting to hear their perspective. They said, "Modeling the device has been very helpful, and using it for fun activities and games like your turn, my turn, picking words and reading a book is so very fun. And even little brother uses it to say small phrases, so it doesn't make him feel like he is different. We use it to say hi and do you want to play with neighbors, and they all think that it's the neatest tool and they want to check it out too." So that's a parent of a child who uses a speech generating device. Okay, so what is aided language input? Aided language input is a research-based strategy where communication partners provide modeled input by highlighting the symbols on the child's communication display as they interact verbally with the child. And this helps the child understand what the symbols mean by modeling it to them in context. So there's several research studies that show that this can also improve receptive and expressive language skills. So the goal of aided language input is to teach language to the child using the modality that we expect them to use. There are some other names for aided language input. You may have heard some of these other names, or you may hear me interchange between some of these today. So just to avoid confusion, I wanted to make sure you know the different terms. Some people may call it aided language stimulation, just good old-fashioned modeling. You might hear augmented language, or partner augmented input is another. So I'm going to play a short video, and you may have seen this video before. It has about 25,000 views on YouTube, but if it's new for you, it's a really great, easy way to understand and learn about what aided language input is. So let me get that on here for you. Okay, so I hope you liked that video. It's a really nice, fun, kind of easy explanation as to why it's important to use aided language input and model on somebody's device with them. And I think a really good takeaway point from that, which you're going to hear me say more throughout the presentation, is that it took months and months in this case, and that is often what we see. You know, using an AAC device is not something that is going to be overnight. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be natural. But the more that it's used and the more that we provide those models over time, the more effective it's going to be. So if you're sitting there listening to this and you have a child who, you know, just started using a device, or a student in your classroom, or on your caseload, if you're a therapist, you know, just know that it does take time. And we'll talk about why that is. So one way to remember this technique is by calling it the triple T. So talk and touch the AAC system in order to teach the system. So this is based on the idea that the communication partner and the person using AAC are speaking the same language, and that language in this case is symbols. So you're encouraging further language development and functional communication this way. So as you see, the communication partner is also using the modality that the child would be using, and the child is using it as well, and therefore you're going to teach the language in that modality. Okay, so to continue on that point, the language that goes in is the language that will come out. So, So if you think about a young child who's learning language, a typical child, we expose them to language and words for at least a year before they actually start repeating the words. If you think about, typical children say their first word around 1. So for a whole year, we're labeling, we're naming things, we're pointing to things, and then finally a year later, they usually say a word that they've heard so many times. Well, that has to be considered when we're thinking about AAC. They need to be hearing models constantly, and it's going to take, lots of repetition, lots of time, and lots of models before they may be proficient in using it as well. All right. So, how do we learn language? Again, if you're a typical child and you're learning language, it's through constant interaction. This makes sense, right? I mean, especially when we consider that a typical child develops language just by being exposed from the parents, their siblings, extended family, peers, everybody around them. They're hearing the words from all these different people, and there's tons of repetition with lots of variety. So that is something to consider when you're thinking about how a typical child learns language. 4,000 to 6,000 is the number of words that a typical developing child hears every day in their first year prior to saying that word in their first year. So we don't necessarily have the expectation during that first year that the child is going to speak this many times, but it's just the exposure that they're getting. They're hearing that word 4,000 to 6,000 times throughout their first year before they actually say it. And I'm sorry, there should be more on this slide that I don't see. Oh, there we go. So that's the number of words that a typical developing child hears per day. But is that how many words we're modeling on a device every day? Probably not. Okay, and that's something that we really want to think more about. Now, 500 is the number of times a child hears their first word before he says it. 50 to 150 is the number of times a word is modeled before a child starts using it independently. Okay, so that's a big difference between a typical child and a child that's hearing a model on an AAC device. But it's still something we need to consider. They need 50 to 150 models before they might start using it. That's a lot of models. And 1 year is how long we immerse in language before we expect to hear a word, again, for a typical child. But usually when we start a child on a device, we often expect that immediately after they're just going to start using it. And that's not the case. We have to really consider that just as other children take so much time and need so much modeling and exposure and repetition to learn language, the same is going to be when you start a child on an AAC device. And again, this goes for any device. I may be sitting here from Saltillo and we'll talk about Saltillo devices, but this goes for any devices as well, or even low-tech forms of communication like, you know, maybe PECs or picture communication symbols, things like that. Okay, 36,500 is the number of hours that a typical 9 to 12-year-old has been exposed to and immersed in oral language. If we apply the same logic to AAC users who receive therapy, speech therapy, 30 minutes, 2 times a week, they receive far less exposure to language. Okay, it's only 700, it would take them 701 years at that rate to obtain the same amount of language immersion on their device as a typical 9 to 12-year-old that's hearing it that many hours. So it's really something to think about when you are starting to facilitate use of a device. So what do we do? In this case, model, model, model. So there's not really an exact rule of thumb, but one suggestion is that for every 5 things that are said on the device and you model 4, maybe the child will just use it for 1. Okay, that's not an exact rule of thumb, but it's kind of a good starting point. I'll repeat it again. For every 5 things that are said on the device, you model 4, and the child should be expected to maybe use it for 1 in that context or that situation. But to do this, that means that we need to use aided language input and have an aided language learning environment. So we have to have a robust enough language system to be able to touch what they're saying. So if you're familiar with Saltillo devices, we really encourage use of our core words and our word power files. I'll have some pictures in some later slides to show you. But when you're thinking of any device and the way it's set up, you want to make sure that you don't have too few words visible on the device, because then there's not going to be a lot of opportunity for you to model. You almost want to have a little bit more or a little bit higher level than your child might be at, so that you can have extra vocabulary on there to model for them. Okay, I'm going to play another video, and this is going to be an example of using aided language input with a young man who uses an AAC device. And in this video, the communication partner does a really excellent job at modeling not only what she's saying, but she also does some modeling about what the individual might want to say. So let's get this video up here for you.
You told me it was okay if I turned on my camera on my iPad. So on my iPad, I turned on my camera.
I turn on camera, iPad.
Okay? Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Kendall, you told me, you said you were tired today, huh?
I'm tired.
I wonder why. I have a question. Why are you feeling tired?
I'm tired.
Why are you tired?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder why you're tired. Let me see. Are you tired because you had too much driving? Was there too much driving today?
Drive.
You drove a lot. So much. You had a big drive to get over here, huh? That was a long drive, right? That's so funny. It took a lot of time.
Are you happy to be here, right?
Looky here. It took a lot of time to get here, huh? You had to wake up early this morning, huh? Yeah, it took a lot of time. Yeah, you had to get up early in the morning, this morning. Yeah.
Morning.
Yeah. So you had to wake up and get out of bed Yeah, you got no more sleeping, huh? No, no, that's not good. Don't get to sleep. Don't. You're funny. Don't sleep. Poor Kendall. No sleeping this morning. Look, let's see.
Morning, don't sleep.
Morning, don't sleep. Poor Kendall. So
All right, so that's a really cool video. I hope you enjoyed seeing that, and I hope it kind of showed you a little bit more about what it means to use aided language input. So you saw there that the therapist working with him, she wasn't modeling every single word that she said. She wasn't using every single word in her sentence. I see you are tired. She didn't do every single word, but she picked some of the main words or some of the core words, and she modeled those using aided language input while she spoke. So she's still speaking verbally, but she's using the device also as the model for him, because again, that's his form of communication. So that is the whole theory behind using aided language input, is that you're using the modality and the form of communication that the individual is using as well to model for them. And you saw that she also used she also did some gestural cueing to get him to use it as well. Okay? So to summarize, in addition to growing language, aided language input also helps us choose our words better, and it also really helps us slow down our speaking rate. So aside from just being a good model, those are some other benefits of using aided language input as well. All right, so now that brings us to you guys as the communication partners. So I hope that by watching that video, you realize that the role of the communication partner is super important. So I want to take a minute and talk about the people who provide aided language input or modeling, and those are the communication partners. So who should be using aided language input? I mean, it's really anybody who interacts with the child or with the individual using a device. So this word wall kind of shows, some people, but it's definitely not an exhaustive list. It's just kind of an idea to show you how many people might interact with one individual in their life. So, parent, a spouse, a teacher, a sibling, SLP, grandparent, friend, classmate, doctor, bus driver. There's so many people that we could consider as communication partners. And because we want to create a language-rich environment, we want to try to train everybody to be an effective communication partner. So it really doesn't do the child any good if only their speech therapist or only their teacher or only mom and dad are using these strategies. We really want to make sure that everyone who interacts with them frequently know these strategies as well. Okay, so communication partners are arguably the most important piece to the success of our individuals using AAC. There's a lot of research that shows that this is true. And 8 out of 10 most frequently reported reasons for device abandonment were actually related to partner training and also support issues. So Saltillo really prides itself on being a company that provides a lot of support. There's other companies out there and other devices out there that have a limit to their support, or they start charging extra after a few sessions to do training and support. Saltillo really prides itself that we do not do that. We have unlimited, forever support for our users that get devices, as well as training. We train everybody. But aside from that, it's just, to go through the whole process of getting a device and then to abandon it because it can be overwhelming to implement or to use, or we don't know how to model or get it, have it be effective. That's that's just unfortunate because, again, it is a process and it might be the best thing for that child. So we really want to see that how crucial the role of the communication partner is in achieving a positive outcome. So with that being said, as communication partners, we need to be aware of some traits that are frequently associated with being a communication partner. Researchers have found that these are the most common 5 traits. So as you work with your clients, try to be aware if you demonstrate some of these common characteristics, and try to reflect on each one so that you can improve them. And in the next slide, I'll show you some ways that we can improve them. But as communication partners, we often take more turns than the child. We often ask mostly yes or no questions. Do you want milk? Do you want cookies? Are you finished? Do you want to go to the playground? Those are all yes or no questions. And if all they have to do is say yes or no, we're not providing opportunity for them to express themselves further. As communication partners, and we're all guilty of it, we frequently interrupt. We might focus too much on the technology and not on the child, or we might provide limited opportunities for use of the device. And the thing is those are some of the traits that we often exhibit as communication partners, but we also know that the children or the individuals using devices can often be passive. They often have limited initiation. Sometimes they know a lot more than they can say or express. A lot of times they respond only in obligatory contexts. They might communicate for a very limited number of reasons, like maybe just their basic wants and needs, or maybe just requesting. And they also might use restricted grammar. So, think about the clients or the children that you either work with, or that, if you have a child who uses AAC, and think about, is this the case with them? Are these common traits for that child? And if so, it'll help us remember why using some of these techniques are so important. Because when you keep this information in mind, you can see that the traits of the communication partner directly affect the traits of the person using AAC. So if we are taking the majority of communicative turns, if we're providing limited opportunities, then that's not helping our passive communicators, and it's just further limiting their opportunity to initiate. So if we want to change the common traits of the people who use AAC, we need to first change as their communication partners. So that's the good news. We can change our behavior as the communication partners, and then we can have a direct impact on the communication skills of the child using the device. So instead of some of those characteristics that we exhibit, how can we improve what we're doing? Well, the first step would be to reflect on our own patterns. And if we try to do the opposite of some of those, what does that really look like? The opportunities listed here are all evidence-based strategies that we can use. So we can try waiting and looking expectantly, giving wait time. We could try asking open-ended questions instead of yes-no questions. We can give, again, wait time, but more with active feedback. We could focus on the child or the person instead of just the technology. And in turn, we can provide a lot more opportunities and model. So the next few slides are going to go into each of these a little bit more in depth and show you some more examples. So when we talk about waiting and looking expectantly, we can pause, we can give an expectant delay. It's a really powerful technique that we can use to encourage communication. And I know sometimes it might feel weird, but sometimes we really need to just pause for like 10 seconds, maybe even longer. And you might see that the individual may be processing, they might need that time to respond. And if it doesn't appear that they're working to respond, then you can try some of the other techniques after providing some wait time. So you'll see a video here of waiting and what that looks like when you're using a device with a child.
Is right here above go. What would you like for me to do?
Sorry, on my end there seemed to be a glitch with that video. Did you guys have that happen to you as well? Were you able to see that video? I'm going to try going out of it and going back in. I'm not sure what happened there.
Is right here above go. What would you like for me to do? No. Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. I see here that that video wasn't super fluid. So what it was a therapist working with a little girl using a device. You probably saw a couple snippets. And basically she said to her, what would you like for me to do? So that's an open-ended question. But then she gave 16 seconds of wait time before she prompted the child again, and sure enough, after 16 seconds, the child said go, because she wanted the therapist to turn the page of the book. So go was obviously their target word that they were using to have her say, to continue on in the book. So she waited, she looked expectantly, and 16 seconds was what was needed. So, instead of kind of jumping in and prompting her again, she offered that wait time, and it was absolutely effective to get that independent initiation from the child. So another strategy listed here would be asking open-ended questions, which is really, really hard. For some reason, it's just natural for us to ask yes or no questions, and we have to really try to talk about or to think about how we can rephrase our questions. So just by rephrasing it from, instead of do you want to blow bubbles, and all they can do is say yes or no, if we rephrase it and said, ooh, bubbles, what should we do? Well, then all of a sudden there's all these different things they could say. They could say open please, they could say help me, they could say let's play, blow bubble, do it, get bubbles. You know, there's so many things that they can express just by simply rephrasing our the way that we ask our question. And of course, this provides an opportunity to increase language because we want to use these kinds of core words with our children. So we want to get them using, you know, a variety of language like open, help, you know, play, blow, and not just over and over again, bubbles, 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 or more, 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 more. Here's another example. You know, maybe they're doing a new activity or trying a new food, and instead of saying, do you like it? Which again would just yield a yes or no question, a yes or no answer, we could rephrase it and say, ooh, what do you think about it? And then all of a sudden they could answer on their device by saying, don't like, or boring, or yucky, or sticky, or delicious, or good. And so just again, by rephrasing the way we're asking our question, there's all of a sudden so much more opportunity for them to express themselves and initiate. And this kind of question expands their language and gives an opportunity for them to use describing words. Or if they say don't like, then they're using some negation and some protesting. Here's one more example. You know, sometimes we might just say, do you want to be finished? Do you want to be all done? And again, that just yields a yes or no. But if we said, you know, what do you want to do? Then it lets them communicate, you know, they want to do more or again or something different. Or maybe they do say all done or finished or stop to express that termination. But this allows them to take control. And that's something that we want to teach them that with the device, they're able to do. Okay, so here, hopefully this next video works for open-ended questions.
Yo. ¿Cómo?
¿Qué comes?
Hamburguesa con queso. Hamburguesa.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why the videos are so slow. I apologize about that. But you're able to see that the mother, this was in Spanish. Our devices do come with Spanish or bilingual files, so they can be used with Spanish speakers or bilingual speakers if it's a Saltillo device. And in this case, the mother asks in Spanish, "What do you eat?" And she gives wait time and that open-ended question, and then he says, "Cheeseburger." So that was an example of both wait time, and you saw how he searched for his answer, and also an open-ended question. But, imagine if she had said, "Did you eat French fries?" Then all he would have had to do was say yes or no. So there wouldn't have been that back and forth exchange or conversation like in the video. Okay, so if you have a hard time with kind of what to say or how to model or which kind of words to expect, we do have some nice tools that you can use kind of as a scripting resource. So I can have this uploaded or sent, and if anybody wants a copy of this. But basically, you just think of some core words that can be used in the activity, and you can think of a kind of like a script that you would say here on the left, and then what they may be able to answer with. Okay, because sometimes it is hard on the spot to think about it, so that's a nice tool that some people have felt are beneficial. Okay, so the next strategy, active feedback. So active feedback is important because we want to respond no matter what. So whether they say something correct or incorrect, it really all deserves a response. So even selections that you think maybe the child did not intend to say, or maybe it wasn't the appropriate response, you don't want to just dismiss those. You still want to respond with active feedback. And this might be a point to really drive home with other people that interact with the child, because we want to make sure that they're consistent in this as well. And the reason that we might do this, and it's important, is because we want to shape or expand the language that they're using. We want to reinforce those communicative attempts. So maybe they didn't say what they were supposed to, or their answer didn't really make sense, but we want to still reinforce that they did and said something. And it still provides a sense of kind of like connection and participation. So this is a really great video, I'm hoping it will work, about active feedback. And you see here, if it doesn't work, I'll explain what happens, but it's a really nice way to show how this can look.
You could say, "I love that. Awesome." Yeah, tadpole in the egg, right? Look, what do you think? Do you think that that's awesome? It's cool?
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I was just saying that to the frog because he laid a bunch of babies. Yeah.
Go.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got you.
Okay, so that worked a little better. Hopefully you saw. But basically, she gave an open-ended question. She said, "What should we say? Should we say awesome? Should we say I like that?" I mean, she gave some examples, but her question was open-ended. What should we say? And then she waited, and she gave that wait time, and the little girl pressed congratulations. Now, it may have been a mishit. It may have been on purpose. But instead of just dismissing it, the therapist said, "Yeah, congratulations. I would say that to him too, because he did an awesome job." So she reinforced the fact that the child used the device. She, acknowledged that participation in that interaction. And then she shaped it to kind of be meaningful to what they were doing. Now, of course, this may not always be a perfect case because there may be something that's said super randomly that is hard to, but you should still try, if you can, to shape it or at least acknowledge it, and say something about what they said, and then you can kind of bring them back to what you're doing instead of just ignoring if they have a mishit. Okay. All right. So, in addition to responding to whatever the person who uses the AAC device says, we also want to focus on what they want to talk about. So this is similar to like what you might think if you're following a child's lead during an activity. You know, we often say follow their lead, follow their lead. This is similar. We want to think about that child or that individual, what they like, what interests them, what might gross them out, what might they like, what might make them laugh, what do they like to do for fun, things like that, so that whatever it is that you're interacting for is meaningful. Okay? So by doing all of these things that we just discussed, you're going to start to create more opportunities to model language. And we know now that creating opportunities is so important because learning something new takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice. A lot of times AAC users have fewer opportunities to communicate. And people are more likely to communicate when they have a reason to. So all of these things and these strategies are going to help in these cases. And we also want to recognize that the device is just a tool, and it's just their modality of communicating. It's just their tool that they're using. But the device itself does not always create the opportunities. We, as the people, as the communication partners, we create the opportunities. So that is something really important that I think, we can try to remember. So take a moment and try to think about planning. You have to also think starting small and building. Again, AAC is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something they're going to pick up immediately. It's going to take a lot of time, and the longer you do it, the better you become. And just try to take a walk through their day and do some things that are natural and in routine. So putting the aided language into practice. All right, so we talked about modeling. Now, what does this look like? You could, if the child that you have in mind is already using a device, you could use their actual device, like you've seen in some of these videos, to model for them. That would probably be the best and obviously easiest. There are some other ways, though, that you can do this. You can use a companion app. So obviously in this example, because I'm coming to you from Saltillo, we have apps like the Touch Chat app, that is a companion app to the device. So maybe having that out on an iPad and you using that while the child uses their device. Or if you have multiple iPads, they're using one and you're using one. You see here the low-tech version. That is a way to print out boards and kind of put them in a binder. So you're printing out just paper copies of their pages. And then as you're saying what you're saying, you are pointing to where the words are so that you're still using that model and that aided language input, even if it's just on a paper form. And then the computer emulator software, that is what we call from Saltillo Chat Editor. Chat Editor is a free download on our website. It is amazing. If you have a Saltillo device, you're probably familiar, but if not, please contact me and I'll help you out with it. But if anybody else can download it free at saltillo.com under downloads, and you just have to have a Windows-based computer, and you can use it. It speaks on your computer just like a device would, so you can have it open on your computer. You can do a ton of different things, make visuals with it. It's really great. All right, but when should you model? So we don't want to create any extra work on you. We don't want you to sit down and have device talking time. That's not practical. Really, it should be embedded within your daily routines, things the child is already doing. Shared reading is a really big one, which I'm going to highlight next, because usually, children are reading books all the time. Meals, maybe if you're in school, some writing time, art, music, at home, during maybe personal care, getting ready in the morning, going to bed at night, obviously greetings, or just during play with some of their favorite toys. So shared book reading is one thing I want to highlight, because what better way to practice something new than doing so within a context that's super familiar and super comfortable, such as reading books. So it's been long recommended that a rich context to support language development with children that are pre-literate or have emergent literacy skills is shared book reading. And it's usually an activity that's taking place regularly at home, in therapy, at school. So those are some reasons why it's a good starting point or a good way to, practice with the device. So when you're reading with a child, you really want to think engagement, fun, and that they should be learning. And you really want to avoid just questions and answers and labeling. You don't want to just be doing, what's that? What's that? What's that? And having them kind of name or label things throughout the book. You want it to be interactive. So when you choose books, you want to find something that would be of interest to them. You want to try to choose books that have a lot of repetition and maybe limited text. Okay, so these are some links that you can go to there's some resources that have examples of books that might be good. And at the bottom here, the Saltillo chat corner, that is on our website as a resource to use as well. All right, hopefully this next video works. It is really cool. And it's of a parent
Lion, lion, what do you hear? I hear a hippopotamus snorting in my ear. Hippopotamus, hippopotamus, what do you hear? I hear a flamingo fluting in my ear. Flamingo, flamingo, what do you hear? I hear a zebra braying in my ear. Zebra, zebra, what do you hear? I hear a boa constrictor hissing in my ear. Boa constrictor, what do... You didn't get it.
Okay, I'm so glad that one worked. So that was a really nice way to hopefully that kind of wrapped it all up for you with everything we talked about, because you see that they're doing a book that has a repetitive line, but maybe this child is only at the level of using one word. So mom is just focusing on the word you. You is a core word. It's a great word. There's so many reasons and contexts we would use it. And you see that she starts out by modeling it herself, and then she fades her model and she starts to expect the child to do it. And as the book goes on and as the video goes on, he's doing it independently. Okay, so another example is Brown Bear. In the Saltillo devices on some of the newer page sets, we have a lot of early books already pre-stored onto our devices. So the vocabulary that goes along with that book is already there on the device. This is an example of Brown Bear. So on the page set, which you see here, there's the different colors, the animals, but there's also some core words like turn the page, my turn, your turn, we, it, things like that, so that they can participate in the book. And you might just think of the child's level. Maybe they're just at the level of using one word. Maybe they're going to start to combine 2 words, things like that. Okay, but you want to think across the books that you do of core words. So core words are those words that we can use in many different settings. So turn the page, again, more, look, read, what. Those are going to be used no matter what book you're doing, they're going to make sense. So you want to kind of not just think about naming, the animals and the colors and the cars or the flowers or things like that. You want to also think of these core words because they're going to get you the most bang for your buck for all other activities. And this is an example of a page set on our device, but this is, a very robust language system, as I was talking about, on one of our word power files. And you see here that there's lots of core words, and there's lots of words that you can model, even if your child's not using yet. But it's a really great way to, these are some of the words highlighted that are commonly used words that were from the previous slide, and you can use them across other activities or in other settings as well. So that's one of the great reasons to use word power files on a Saltillo device. All right, this quickly, because I know we're running out of time, is one of the therapists made an adaptation to a book. So she used our software, the chat editor I mentioned, and she made little visuals to go along with the book that coincide with the symbols on the device. So you see here at the bottom, what do is on there, and each page has that for the what do you see, and then it also has some other visuals throughout the book. All right, so some things to make it easier. You might want to practice first. Modeling sounds easy in theory, but in the beginning, if it's something new to you, you might need a little bit of planning. And then once you become more comfortable, it does get easier. It does become intuitive and natural. But, some thoughtful planning might help set the stage to create some kind of lifelong habits. So these are some ideas: picking just 1 or 2 target words, simplifying the words, following their lead. Wait after you say something to allow them to have a turn. Pay it forward is just, once you kind of get the hang of it, passing it along to other people that might interact with that child as well. All right, some other quick tips and tools. This is the example that I mentioned in the Brown Bear book. So having some visuals using our chat editor software would be one idea that you can model. Another idea is maybe putting a sticky note in the book as a reminder to you, like, oh wait, what word am I going to really focus on to model today? Having that there might be a way for you to remember. And it's also obviously going to stand out to the child, which is a good thing. Or maybe a sticky note that has the questions that you want to ask, making a quick list of open-ended questions and putting a little sticky note on the inside cover of the book. And then just, remember, dream big, start small, act now. I love that quote. This is a process. If you have someone out there using a device, you know that it takes time. Remember what I mentioned, that you have to think about how typical children learn development, how long that takes, how many models and repetitions they need, and using aided language input on a device in the same way with the same repetition is going to be helpful as well for your child using a device. So please take down my information. This is my email. This is my phone number. I am the assistive technology consultant for your area for Saltillo. Again, we have NovaChat, Chat Fusion, Touch Chat Express, and the Touch Chat app. Those are our devices, and I'm so willing and eager to be a support to any of you that may be working with our devices already, or any of you that might be interested. If you feel like you know a child who would be a good candidate and would benefit from a device, My role is to support you and to help you through the process from start to finish. And even once they get the device, I do the trainings, I meet with everybody that's involved, and it's a very ongoing process for whatever's needed. And then quickly here at the bottom is our website, saltillo.com. We have a ton of great resources. There's more webinars. There's implementation tools that you can access to help you. Again, whether or not you're using one of our devices or not, we just have some really cool resources for you. So if there are any questions, I haven't seen any thus far, but feel free to add them to the chat box. And if you have to go, I know it's 4 o'clock, I understand. I appreciate so much that you took the time to listen, and I hope that you learned a lot. Thank you so much.